Front and center on the program, a shot at hope, bringing the COVID-19 vaccine to Filipinos.
So yan mga kababayan ko, basta mabakunahan kayo, maghintay lang tayo, pera makahiram tayo kaagad.
As pharmaceuticals develop and produce COVID-19 vaccines in record time, how quickly can they reach our shores?
End of the year or early 2022.
But as with any vaccine, there are major hurdles for less developed healthcare systems such as ours, from the financial, logistical, and distribution challenges to the cold storage constraints. And how about public confidence in vaccines? It is a waiting game in a world that can no longer wait for a shot, just one shot at hope, contained in one small vial. I'm Io Ontiveros. We'll be asking the hard questions and stories that matter to you. Front and center is a shot at hope. What are the vaccines that we are betting on from dozens that are in clinical trials from around the world? The huge task that lies ahead, the challenges of bringing vaccines to our shores, and will people be willing to get the first shots of the COVID vaccine? Well, the country is betting on 5 vaccines that are on track for clinical trials here. Our Caroline Bonkin, who's been putting the COVID story front and center almost every single day in our coverage, gives us the rundown. Caroline, what vaccines will be, or we hope will be, available to the Philippines? When will they arrive here, and at what stage are they in terms of the clinical trials?
So, Pia, there will be 2 kinds of trials here. The one sponsored by the World Health Organization, that's a solidarity trial, which will be done simultaneously with other countries. And then the independent trials, wherein a vaccine developer has a partner organization here for the study. For the solidarity trial, the DOST says that there will be 2 vaccines that will be tested here. The WHO will provide the doses and then will pay for the logistical expenses. 14 hospitals are participating. We have no further updates yet on when will this begin, but health and DOST officials already met with WHO representatives last Friday. We were told that we should be expecting the protocols in the coming days, kasi ito na lang talaga yung hinihintay ngayon. Yun na yung kulang para malaman kung sino yung kasali, saan ito gagawin, at kung anong bakuna yung susubukan. For the independent studies, 5 of the 11 vaccines at the late stage trial already filed an application for a local study here. So far, DOST PCHR, the Executive Director, Jaime Montoya, said Clover and Sinovac already have the endorsement from the Vaccine Experts Panel and the Ethics Board. Those 2 are from China. And then we also have Gamaleya, Sputnik V, Janssen, and then AstraZeneca. But AstraZeneca's application has been deferred. Sputnik, which was among the first one to ask the government to hold trials here, is still behind, since they haven't responded yet to the additional comments from the vaccine experts. Yeah.
Yeah, Caroline, before we go any further, what were these additional comments on the Sputnik V vaccine? Do we know? And why has there been no response?
Well, Pia, just to explain, the Vaccine Experts Panel and the Ethics Board are asking several documents from those asking for applications. So we have the animal studies, phase 1 and phase 2 results, and then the protocols for phase 3 study, as well as the copy of the informed consent. So far, Gamaleya, which is the developer of Sputnik V, still have some missing information on phase 3 study protocols, and they also haven't submitted a copy of their informed consent. Ang sabi nga ni Dr. Nina Gloriani, who's heading the Vaccine Experts Panel, although Gamaleya said that Sputnik V has 92% efficacy, they don't want to rely on press releases, and they want to see the scientific interim data, and that's what they're waiting for from the Sputnik V's developer, Gamaleya. Yeah.
And also, Caroline, an additional question, and very briefly now, is AstraZeneca on deferred action mode, pero nagkapirmahan, hindi ba, last Friday?
Yeah, that's for the clinical trial, basically. Dr. Montoya was explaining that AstraZeneca's application for clinical trial is still pending their decision kasi they want to know first if they will still hold another clinical trial here since they already applied for an emergency authorization use at the medical medicines and healthcare products regulatory agency of the United Kingdom. So we have to take note also that there are two different ways that e-vaccine has to go through if whether if meron silang EUA or kung wala silang EUA. So mag-iiba kasi yung proseso pagka may EUA yung AstraZeneca because they won't have to go through the Vaccine Experts Panel and Ethics Board. Instead, pag may EUA sila, diretso na sila sa FDA and then FDA has its own pool of vaccine experts which will scrutinize AstraZeneca before they give their license here. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Caroline Bonkin. Front and center in the vaccine trials here in the country is the Food and Drug Administration. In just a moment, we'll speak with FDA Director General Eric Domingo. Stay with us. This is CNN Philippines. We keep the stories that matter front and center. I'm Pia Ontiveros. Welcome back to the program. After vaccine candidates go through simultaneous vaccine experts panel and ethics board reviews, now that's when the FDA comes into the picture. The Food and Drug Administration. Joining us is Director General Eric Domingo. Sir, thank you for joining us on the show. Let's begin with this. You've said you're hopeful that we might have a vaccine here by the first quarter of 2021. If some pharmaceutical firms apply for emergency use authorization, how big a possibility is that?
Well, Pia, things are going much faster than we anticipated. I mean, in like the past few months, we thought that the first EUAs would probably be issued by early next year. However, the FDA counterpart of the United Kingdom already gave an emergency use approval for Pfizer. And the news is that the US FDA is probably going to give EUAs also to Pfizer and maybe Moderna within the next few weeks. So that means at least these two companies would be then preparing to apply for authorizations in several countries, including the Philippines. And if they do apply with us by maybe early January, it would take about a month for us to process an approval. And if everything goes well and all the requirements are there, we will be able to grant an emergency use authorization also within the month of January. So, best case scenario, it is possible that 2 months after that, with the production and then, of course, the delivery and your supply chains, it's possible for some vaccines maybe to get here by towards the end of the first quarter of next year.
Well, that's really good to hear, Dr. Domingo. Like you said, in the United Kingdom, they're rolling out the vaccines at EUA. The Health Secretary of the United Kingdom, Matt Hancock, said, and we quote, "Help is on the way." And also, let's listen to what a top BioNTech official had to say.
We believe that it is really the start of the end of the pandemic.
Dr. Domingo, these words are music to anyone's ears, and the start of the end of this pandemic. We can't wait to hear those words here in our country. Can you give us an update now on FDA's approval process for vaccine candidates Clover and Sinovac? At what point are we in?
Well, the first one was Sinovac. They actually have passed several hurdles already. They were endorsed by the Vaccine Expert Panel, and they're undergoing technical review right now at the FDA. I believe we're just waiting for a few more documents to show, just to assure of the quality of the vaccine under investigation that will be used, and sometimes a final review, final go from the Research Ethics Board. So once they get that, they will be good to go, and they will be able to start their trial. On the part of Clover, this was endorsed last week by the Vaccine Expert Panel to the FDA. So they just actually recently submitted their clinical trial protocol and the required documents. So these are now under review, and if we need some more information from them, we will be getting back to them on that. And once they get the final clearance from FDA and the research ethics boards, then they will also be able to start their clinical trials here.
Top U.S. infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci had had this to say, and we quote, "If you have a highly efficacious vaccine and only a relatively small 50% of the people get vaccinated, you're not going to get the herd immunity you need. What we need is we need to get as many people as possible vaccinated." Dr. Domingo, Secretary Charlie Galvez was talking about spacing out all these the vaccines. We're aiming for vaccines for all here in the country in 3 to 5 years, like 20 million for the first year, for example. Staggering the vaccines, is this going to be good for us or not good for us, or is this, the best we can do?
Well, right now the global supply is not enough to cover 70 or 80% of the whole global population. We foresee, the World Health Organization foresees that by next year, all of the vaccine makers combined together might be able to produce maybe 2 to 3 billion vaccines. And there are almost 8 billion people now in the world. So that means the manufacturers will be able to supply maybe 20 to 30% of the population for 2021. And even if we evenly distribute that among all countries, most countries will be able to get something like 20% of their population. That is why we have to prioritize. We have to prioritize first, of course, the health workers, because if they get exposed a lot to the virus, and if they get sick, then there's nobody to take care of those who will get sick in the future. And then, of course, the older people, especially with comorbidities, because when they get sick, they have the highest possibility of dying from COVID-19. And then after that, we go down the ladder of prioritization until we get to cover maybe 70 to 80% would be a good what we call target to achieve some form of herd immunity.
And Dr. Domingo, we are going to be able to afford all of this, right? I mean, we do have the private sector helping us also, but we will be able to afford all these vaccines that we will need to vaccinate the entire population.
Oh, yes. The government's really moving everything to make sure that the vaccines are prioritized because, we're losing a lot more money, I believe, by not vaccinating than, making a good investment on a vaccine that will cover 70 to 80% of the population and getting the economy back on track. So the government is looking for ways, not only from our current budget and the current funds that we have, but also from other partners who might be able to help us finance the vaccination needs for the next couple, maybe 2 or 3 years.
And Dr. Domingo, my final question and a very brief reply, please, from you. Quite a lot of people are trying to cast doubt on the vaccine as an effective defense against COVID-19. Doesn't help that vaccine confidence is not very high in this country. What do you say to people like that?
Well, there's no perfect vaccine, but if you weigh the risk versus the benefit, that's what will make you decide. So far, none of the vaccine candidates have shown severe adverse events. We cannot be 100% sure that no adverse events are going to come out now or in the future. But we know that having yourself vaccinated, the advantages far outweigh the risks. And you're going to get a full information, and we will need to secure your full informed consent before you allow yourselves to be vaccinated. So don't be afraid. Nobody's going to vaccinate anybody who does not want to get a shot.
FDA Director General Eric Domingo, thank you very much, sir, for joining us. The stories that matter are front and center amid the global pandemic. Public trust and confidence in vaccines now more crucial than ever. More after the break. Stay tuned. Here on Front and Center, we look at the big picture to better understand the issues that matter. I'm Pia Ontiveros. Aside from financial, logistical, and distribution challenges, another hurdle to ending this pandemic is the low trust in vaccinations. The DOST's Health Research Council Director, Dr. Jaime Montoya, discusses the matter front and center with us. Dr. Montoya, good to talk to you today to help wrap things up for us. A lot of care is put into vaccine development because, as we all know, it took years to develop vaccines for other infectious diseases in the past. But now that there is this race to find the vaccines that will provide a strong defense for all of us against COVID-19 and to save the human race, remind us, sir, why it's important to have these 3 phases in clinical trials.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we understand the public anxiety with regards to vaccines that are being developed now. And we all know that it's actually the possible measure to address the COVID-19 pandemic currently. But it actually has to undergo several stages, or what we call clinical trials, for it to be reviewed and approved by the Food and Drug Administration. These are phases 1, 2, and 3. Phase 1 is usually for 10 to 100 people and is usually done to assess safety. Phase 2 is about 100 to 1,000 people and is usually done to assess efficacy. Also for determining the right dose and ensure to some extent the efficacy. And for phase 3, this is actually devoted to determining the efficacy of the vaccine, its ability to produce, to induce or stimulate antibodies to the participants. And this actually involves a larger group of people, usually more than 1,000.
And this, of course, Dr. Montoya, is all overseen by a task group for vaccine evaluation and selection.
Yes, there's a national task force, and this is actually headed by the vaccine czar, Secretary Carlito Galvez. And under that is one of the task groups. We call it the Task Group of Vaccine Evaluation and Selection. This is the one chaired by the Department of Science and Technology, which involves also other agencies like the DOH, RITM, the Department of Trade and Industry, Department of Foreign Affairs, the National Development Company. And the function of this is actually to review applications for both clinical trials and possible product registration in the Philippines before it is actually approved or given final approval by the FDA.
Dr. Montoya, we have these WHO solidarity trials. What a beautiful word to use, solidarity. Does it mean that none of us are safe if not all of us are safe?
Well, not really. Of course, the WHO experts actually decide on which vaccines will be included in the WHO Solidarity Trial, which we participated in by about 200 clinical sites in about 100 countries worldwide. They have different sets of criteria, among which are the efficacy and safety, as well as the logistics requirements, such as the cold chain requirements, whether they require ultra freezers or not. And based on this set of criteria, they will have to determine which of these vaccines will eventually be chosen to be part of the vaccine trial, which will be done in different countries. And hopefully, it will be done fast over a period of 2 to 3 months, and we have immediately information on which of these vaccines are truly safe and effective that can actually be pushed forward for approval by different regulatory bodies.
Dr. Montoya, when are we going to see the first round of vaccines? There's talk about 2022 or perhaps emergency use authorization by first quarter next year. Are we able to say right now when we're going to see those vaccines?
If we're talking about the availability of actual vaccines that can be used by Filipinos, we have to determine when it will be approved by the Food and Drug Administration in the country. Now, if we're going to see how the earliest players are performing, and I should say, for example, the likes of Pfizer, their Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, and Moderna, and also Astra, they've already filed applications for what we call emergency use authorization in the US and in the UK. If they are given these approvals, then it will actually facilitate their application for the same emergency use authorization in other countries, including the Philippines. If we predict, and our prediction is right, that the approvals will be issued within the month, December, then maybe the earliest they can file their application in other countries like the Philippines is January. And so our safe estimate maybe is that it will be given approval for emergency use authorization for some of these vaccines maybe at the end of the first quarter, about March or early second quarter of next year.
Dr. Montoya, just a one-word answer sana po, a very brief reply to this question. Will the COVID vaccine be part of the government's immunization program in the future?
Yes, it will. It will be part.
All right. And Dr. Montoya, how do we balance this? No, the pharmaceutical industry, of course, is a business, but at the same time, this is a race to save the human race. How do we balance that? In one sentence, doctor, can you reply to that?
There are two basic criteria that has to be considered: safety and efficacy. If they're able to satisfy both of this, it gets approval from the FDA and becomes available in the Philippines.
Okay. President Duterte was speaking a few days ago, and we just wanted to listen to his words very briefly.
Yeah,
If any country is excluded by reason of poverty or strategic unimportance, this gross injustice will haunt the world for a long time. It will completely discredit the values upon which the United Nations were founded. We cannot let this happen. No one is safe unless everyone is safe.
So, Dr. Montoya, by way of reaction to what President Duterte said, my final question for you is this: do we have a shot at hope?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear the question. I apologize.
My final question, Dr. Montoya, do we have a shot at hope?
Yes, definitely.
Dr. Jaime Montoya, Health Research Council Director, thank you very much, sir. Maraming salamat po for joining us on the show. Now it's time to make sense of it all here on Front and Center. It is defense that wins basketball games, and it is also defense that will win the battle against this pandemic. While practicing minimum health standards keeps the virus at bay, there's nothing like a vaccine to stop an infectious disease in its tracks, much like a game-changing block on a crucial basketball shot. We all hope that government can overcome the many logistical, storage, and distribution problems, plus talk about the fear of vaccine safety. Because it's our one shot at hope, our one shot at winning this war. So when people chant defense, defense, we can imagine a post-COVID world, hopefully not too far in the future. This is Front and Center. I'm Pia Ontiveros. Thanks for joining us.